All about you. All about you. Okay, everybody, welcome back to Your Crisis Coach with Scott H. Silverman, the gray-haired gentleman in the middle, in my middle at least. It's not always in the middle, and me, Fred Carroll. How are you today, Mr. Scott?
I am well today, Fred, and I've shifted my attitude to being positive. So I don't want to shock you with that, but things are going pretty well, and the kids are happy. Michelle's happy. We're just moving along. We just had our experience with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, so finished the Day of Atonement and the holiest day of the year.
You didn't atone to me.
You were on the short list, and I just kind of bundled you with people on the East Coast. So
Okay.
made it easy. It was a short list this year. I did pretty good this year. I pretty much handled most of my business as best I could.
Good.
So how about you, Fred? How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm getting ready to go on vacation out to Salt Lake City, Utah on Thursday, Friday. I don't know. I'll just wait for my daughter to say, don't forget we're leaving today. And then I go.
What are you doing out there, Fred?
My son lives out there and his husband, and my niece is getting married. So I have sisters out there also in that area. And
so
then I'm coming home.
What are you going to tell people when they say, so what are you doing now, Fred?
They're all very aware and supportive. Very aware and very supportive that I stepped away from my full-time job to seek myself out. That I took let's call it a mental break with hopes of being able to turn it into something. None of this, my family's always raised us to make our choices and deal with our consequences on the back end. But none of us we don't let each other drown. Let's put it that way. So I'll get some honest feedback from them. Not everybody's on board all the time, but they're supportive enough that I trust them. I could still tell them everything and know they're going to tell me the truth. So that's important, I think.
That'll be fun. Yeah, when you get together for weddings, depending upon who you sit with, you may get some questions that you weren't anticipating.
Well, I don't have to worry about it it's a dry wedding, obviously, being a Mormon wedding. It's a dry wedding, so I don't have to worry about that part of it. You know, nobody's going to come asking me for help on that. But so
you'd be surprised.
Well, yeah, I know. Listen, there's plenty out there. I grew up in this with the Mormon background and stuff. And I mean, at one time, the president of Ernest and Julio Gallo was a Mormon. Made no sense to me as a kid that a Mormon could run a liquor business. But then I realized as I got older, that doesn't matter. You don't have to be a drinker to sell drinks. So, but you got a guest today. I see.
We have a guest today, Deborah.
We do.
Deborah, how do you pronounce your last name so we get it right?
It's like Heinz ketchup. It's Meitz. Yeah. I just got to show you this. Look at how similar where I am is to where you're sitting.
That's amazing.
I know.
Well, and this background just popped up with Chrome. I didn't really pick it, or Fred picked it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I
look at where is he? Yeah, crazy.
So Deborah is here, Fred, because, you and I have talked a lot about moving a portion of our conversation, or not a portion, but a significant amount around the mental health issues that are going on and mental health well-being, if you will, with people and families. And I would think our country has experienced. People are being tested at a variety of different levels. And one of the things I've certainly learned over the years is most people don't have the tools to deal with it. I mean, you even said you mentioned you're going to take a mental break, and I wasn't sure if you meant mental health or just a mental break. And I don't know if there's much of a difference, but we'll find out. We'll talk to our expert here today. So Deborah, really, thanks so much for joining us. So tell us all about you and what you're doing and what you do in your personal life or business life, whatever you're most comfortable with. And, the floor is all yours. Welcome.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, I have been a licensed psychotherapist since 1987, so I've been doing it a while. I had a big counseling clinic in Palm Desert for 27 years, Village Counseling. had my own TV show with my ex-husband for 7 or 8 years. It's a family affair. I wrote a couple books. And then in later life, narrowed it down a little bit to be in my own practice with a friend of mine, a colleague. And I have a SoulPath Sessions podcast that I do with my colleague, friend Brenda Littleton. And I'm really into, as far as my psychological practice, I've learned a little bit of everything along the way. Things that help me, I tend to bring into my practice. Things that help other people, I repeat. So I do a lot of work with people in transition, people that are like Fred, that are kind of wondering what to do at the next stage of life and need support for that. I work with a lot of complex trauma. I work with people who are having a really hard time with basic body functions, just sleeping, eating, thinking, getting around because they feel so much anxiety or depression. So I do trauma-informed therapies, which is great. And I love what I do. Yeah, so that's about me professionally. I do a lot of work on consciousness, so people that are really interested in things like near-death experiences, people who've had some sort of out-of-body experiences, things they can't explain. That's something I'm really interested in and well-versed in. I help people with some of those kind of questions when they feel ungrounded by those kinds of experiences. I've done a little bit of everything. I've done workshops and groups, and right now I'm just getting ready to do my next podcast when I get back in the desert. And what I'm enjoying, what I'm digging, is the fact that, my life has sent me to the Pacific Northwest where I can escape when it's too hot in the desert. And I spend most of my free time kayaking, walking through the rainforest, going to the beach. Everything within Ocean Shores is within a couple miles of me. And golfing, which I took up because, I had to punish myself somehow. So, and painting. So that's another newfound interest is watercolor. And I'm just digging it. So at this stage of life, I feel like I can work, I can play, and kind of get my balance again. So I think that's important, as we move into I'm moving into my 70th year next year. And it really hit me that I wanted to never retire. As long as I don't have to retire, I want to stay active in my work. But I also want to develop my personal interests more. And so that's kind of me in a nutshell, and it feels really good. And I have 3 beautiful kids, and I love them. And one lives in Portland, and he comes to visit me, and then 2 in LA area, and I see them when I go back home. Yeah. All right. So that's me.
So do your kids have kids?
Nope. I have a beautiful stepdaughter and her husband, and they have graced us with 3 incredibly adorable kids, and they are my grandchildren. My kids all work in human services, and they're just really busy helping other people. They just don't know how they could do more. My 2 older sons are psychotherapists. One runs a great big agency in Orange County that helps children. My daughter teaches special needs kids, and they just have only so much energy to help others. So I'm really busy with my 3 grandkids when I get home. They're 9, 6, Aiden, who's 9, Oliver, who's 6, and Stella, who is 1. And they live about 10 minutes away. So I get as much grandparenting as I can.
Great. So share with us a little bit, because you've been doing this for a while, as you shared. What have you seen with what happened with COVID and people being homebound and the world changing almost, what was it, about a 3-year window? What have you seen that's different today compared to maybe what you were seeing prior to that? I call it a catastrophic event because I think it impacted so much of the country, and in a variety of different ways, and some of it's still lingering. So, and I don't think we're going to really see the long-term effects for quite some time, but I think a lot of people were impacted in ways that we're just kind of digging out of. So from your experience, what's different today than what you may have been seeing and doing, even though you may have been applying your expertise and seeing the common things you talk about, share that you've seen probably quite a bit. But how do you share about what was before and what's happening today? Can you really put your finger on it?
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest changes is we all went online. I mean, for almost 3 years, I worked almost entirely virtually. And for me, like getting back in my office and seeing people was a weird experience. I'd done this for years, but it just felt like so odd. I almost gave up my office. And then I realized, pandemics don't last forever. So while I went through that, some of my clients went through that. I have clients who still don't feel like they want to come into my office. Majority of them, well, I would say about a third of them want to be virtual. So I see people, as a life coach, I see people all over the world, and that's been kind of nice. I mean, the positive end of it, people are more willing to get therapy virtually if they can't come in or don't want to come in. That's been a really positive thing. Um, the negative effects I've seen largely are with the kids that went through it, that missed so many important developmental stages of being in high school, or just missed academics for several years. They got disengaged, and developmentally they can be a little bit behind. They got used to being in their room, they got used to being on devices, they just went all virtual, got into gaming. It was really hard for them to come back into school, feel behind, feel like they had to be out in the world. It was, so some of the kids I see still have some of those after effects of that, and we acknowledge it together, like, you know, what it was like when they were home so much. So that was a big deal. I've also watched, you know, the reliance on social media grew. That was our family. It was there before. I don't want to suggest that it wasn't there before, but it became entirely what was going on Instagram or what was going on TikTok. So kids and grown-ups who had more diversified interest started living through those media a lot more. And it's interesting to me. Like, I see kids whose whole life is TikTok, and they get really strong views as a result of whatever they watch, their algorithm. So algorithms have really contributed to people being divided and getting on one stream of thought and having a really hard time imagining there are other worlds. So understanding the algorithm, it understands what we're interested in, and it just keeps giving us more of the same. And that creates a lack of perspective. And it can create a lot of anger. And that's in all age groups. I mean, I've had clients come in and want to leave the country, feeling really angry, and watching way too much news. I mean, I have people who have anxiety and depression simply because I don't care which side of the fence they're on. They're angry, and some are into conspiracies, and then they start drinking and using to deal with the end of the world stuff. I mean, there's just a new reason to escape, and that's been challenging. You know, I'm glad to see that now we're post-pandemic, that people are getting outside and, you know, doing things and seeing each other and having vacations. It's made it better. But it's still, that's the lingering effect I see, is that people imagine that what they're watching is telling them the whole truth, and
Yeah,
having a really hard time.
it's interesting you mentioned the algorithm and stuff. It's such a strange thing that if you show interest in something just once, how it switches everything in your social media. Just for instance, my daughter was away, she's 25 years old. She's away with her girlfriends on a girls' trip, and they're all at a pool. And I like the picture. Of course, they're all in bikinis and stuff. And then I get flooded with nothing but pictures of girls in bikinis, but it's not my style. Now, how do you get out of that algorithm? It doesn't let you go. So I understand what you mean by the news cycle too, because
Mm-hmm.
I see it in many of, even in my children. I see how their news outlets are through social media. 3-minute bursts of this person said this, even when it comes to medical things, when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to eating habits or vaping or smoking or
Mm-hmm.
drinking or all these things, how to get away from a ticket. Everything's based off a 3-minute TikTok and somebody you don't know. They don't listen to me, they listen to them. So you had made a comment before about what kind of therapist are you?
I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a marriage family therapist.
What is the difference between not each? I know I'm sure there's many, but
Oh, there's a
what's a
big difference. Yeah.
psychotherapist?
Well, I went into marriage family therapy because it's systems therapy. I mean, I really, when I was studying the different therapies, it was focused on the individual. A lot of therapies were just focused on the individual. And as I was studying, I was realizing nobody's just a result of themselves, a result of the communities we live in, the families we live in, the interaction between us and our families and the communities and our friendships. So it really is based on, by the way, that leads us back to the topic, that the kind of communities that people are involved in really does shape them temperamentally and personally. So that's it. And that means I work with couples and I work with families whenever possible. Sometimes it's hard to see whole families, but I do work with kids and I work with adolescents and their parents. And it's wonderful because when you can change the environment at home, the child changes. I never could see the point in just seeing a child and not seeing their parents or their caregiver, because they're influenced by that environment. So when kids give me the permission to bring their parents, and that's when they feel safe expressing to me what is frightening to them or shaming to them, and or angering them, and they can finally get the language to bring their family in, their parent in, that's when you see the change.
Excellent.
Yeah. And same with couples, people, when they're feeling alienated, in their marriage, their relationship, their stress levels go way up. And so bringing the couple in and teaching them to respectfully reconnect to each other is just vital. So important.
Yep. Great. What do you got, Scott?
So when your clients, do you call your clients or do you, okay. So when you see people, do you spend time, because obviously when someone, I would assume, first reaches out, their hair's on fire, so to speak, or their level of confusion or anxiety is deeply rooted. When you start to spend time with them and drill down on what's going on and then coming up with ideas and suggestions and thoughts, what's your average time to get someone from like their hair's on fire at 10 to maybe down to a 1 or 2 where they can start to process with some of the tools that you've given them, and then, versus their level of dependency on being with you and the time they spend, because I'm sure it's not like a chiropractor, who wants to basically adjust your body every week for the rest of your life. But some people go short term, some people long term, and I'm sure you have a variety of different time lengths you spend with people. But what's the general amount of time it takes to take someone from a 10 being or 1 being the worst, 10 being the best? Where in that number would you say, and what time does it take approximately to get them, kind of off the ledge, so to speak?
Yeah. So I have a model that I tell clients when they call me a lot of times and they're in crisis. 4 sessions. The first one, so I can learn what's going on. And maybe the second one, if they have more content. Then we start getting into what's healing. And then we start applying it. Okay. And then we assess it. So within 4 sessions, most people feel more stability. So I like to call it the square, and so then sometimes people can space their appointments out. I have a revolving caseload of, thousands of people I know. And some people call me just for like an adjustment, like the chiropractor. But I like to think of it, and there's a saying in therapy that we follow the tail of the comet. We aren't the comet. We follow our client and we see what their capacity is. For instance, I'm a cancer specialist, so I see some people going through the cancer journey. I worked at Gilda's Club for 6 years as a facilitator. It was a cancer support community. It was wonderful. And when you're working with somebody who has an illness, there's more to the support that they might need. So there's different situations. But typically stabilization starts to happen and it starts to get activated around the 3rd session. And then there can be other blooms that come off of that. Once you solve the presenting problem and a person becomes more stable, they might have another conflict. And so we just kind of have to follow the tail of the comet to see where that goes.
So that being said, would you say that the severity of need that you're experiencing, that the client is experiencing, is it different now in today's world with what's going on? Or are people being, like you said, you kind of peel the onion back and then all of a sudden there's 5 or 6 other things that they haven't processed, or the untreated trauma concept that, we see in our industry all the time with people. And, and then of course there's the part about, I really don't need a therapist, or I'll be just fine, or I can do this on my own. How is that today compared to a couple of years ago as well?
It's actually better. More people since the pandemic seek therapy because it was easier to access. When you can just Zoom, you can be in your house. You don't have to show up physically. People were trapped. They were worried. They were scared. And so therapy became less stigmatized. That's one really good thing. And with respect to some of the social media, like TikTok, there's a lot of push to go to therapy. The negative part is TikTok is not therapy. It can be helpful. It can be informative. It can be educational. But it can also be misleading in the sense that, just learn this or know this and you'll be fine. But in general, more people come to therapy. My experience is people are less embarrassed about being in therapy. They're more willing to come to therapy. They have less hurdles. I see people that have little kids and they can get their spouse to watch the kids for an hour while they go in the back bedroom and have a session. And that's been a real advantage. So I think there's a lot of positives. A lot of positives. The other thing is because there are like podcasts and YouTube, and there's a lot of resources online that I share with my clients. In the old days, I'd give my clients a handout. And sometimes I still do, but it's a virtual handout and it'll be along with a YouTube video or along with a podcast, something that can supplement their therapy. And I'm finding a lot of my clients on their own are finding things that supplement the hour we do. And it's largely helpful.
Are you finding that more men are coming forward?
Yeah, there's still more women than men typically, but I would say about a third of my caseload is men. Men are not there with women yet. Yeah, I think men are a little slower to come on board. A lot of men come on because their wives drag them, but they're good. Generally, they're really good clients. I mean, the challenge men have had with therapy, and I don't blame them, is that most therapists are women, and they're kind of like, what are you going to know? You know, you're not a guy. And I sympathize with that. So once I get a man in my office, I've learned a lot about men and their resistance. Many men think differently, and you got to respect the male psyche. You know, men are more solution oriented a lot of times. The men have gripes about women that are legitimate. For instance, women have a tendency to go on and on and on and on. Then I'll say, the worst thing for most men to hear is a woman saying, I need to talk to you. Because he's hearing lecture. He's hearing, you're going to be punished. And I'm going to drag out every single thing that you've done. I'm going to overwhelm you. And when you can't take it and you withdraw or you get aggressive, I'm going to, get even angrier with you. And then I'm going to tell you we need a therapist. So men are like, why do I need to go sit in a room where you're going to tell this perfect stranger all the things you just said about me? So she's going to be prejudiced against me. So and I don't blame any human being for having that feeling. Another thing that women tend to do, and I say this as a woman, so I guess I can just say, women tend to point at the problem a lot, and they don't necessarily get in touch with their needs. So when I'm working with women, a lot of times I'll say, well, what do you want to know? What would the change look like? You know, I know you're complaining because he sits and looks at his phone a lot, and you complain about, but what are you asking if he'd be willing to do? Can you tell him how much you miss him? Can you tell him that you want to have 20 minutes when he gets home after he changes his clothes to sit out in the backyard and talk and hang out and hear about his day? Women tend to get just very frustrated and forget about their own needs and naming needs. And when a woman can do that, men go like, oh, you're asking me for something, and I can consider whether I want to do it or not. And the next thing is when a woman asks a man for something, give him a little space to think about it instead of jumping on him. You know, she says, I want to go to Lake Arrowhead. Well, I don't know. Think about it. I want to go in November. I want to see the changing color, and we could take a long weekend. Think about it. Teaching women how to talk to men, I think, is a big piece of men wanting to come into therapy.
Yeah, we're a difficult breed. We definitely are. We have a difficulty about us. But you're right. I'm not somebody that seeks therapy, and my mindset always goes to, well, I already know what's wrong with me. So why would I pay somebody to tell me the same thing I already know? Not that I do know from a medical standpoint or from your standpoint, but
Yeah.
I will often run that through my mind. And that's the same reason why we die of heart attacks when we only got heartburn, because we don't want to spend the money to sit I'm not going to sit in an ER all night long. It's the male mindset. A woman will go to the doctor. She will go seek help outside of knowing and stuff. So it is difficult. And I fall in that 55-year-old, grew up where you're a man. Men don't do this. Men don't do that. Constantly being fed that from people I thought were in charge of me, telling me men don't cry, men don't do this. Now
That's
it's
right.
softened. It's definitely softened, and it's okay. And that's part of the reason Scott and I do this, is to allow people to know that it's all right not to be all right.
Yeah. That's a beautiful change, and I'm appreciating what you're saying. It's in defense of men. I think that is really wise to say, what am I going to get out of therapy? Are you going to judge me? I mean, there's some, it's okay to be cautious. I mean, if a man comes, the way I get men in my office, is I say to the woman or the partner, ask if you can be a guest to the therapy so he can tell you his side of it. what he thinks is wrong. She's like, I'm going to drag him in and I'm going to tell him what is wrong. But a man is invited. He won't, because I typically do. Another reason I want to be a systems or family therapist, I know that one camera lens is not the whole thing. There's all these different perspectives. So when a man comes in and he talks about, or a partner comes in and they talk about their relationship, or when a child comes in and they talk about their parent, I'm going to get different views of the same thing. And I'm going to weigh those views because I know not one of them is the whole gestalt. So I think there's a sense of respect. I mean, I think how I as a woman would feel if I had to go to a male therapist. If, a man brought me into a male therapist, I might feel ganged up on. So I'm sensitive to that. There are not enough male therapists. I'm really glad both of my sons are therapists. But there are not enough male therapists to work with.
Yeah, excellent. So, Scott, what do you got before we wrap this up?
So do you think the demand for, because I know there's a shortage of mental health providers in our community, San Diego, and it concerns me. And I talk to families all the time. And when I hear a mom say, I've got a 7-year-old that's just completely out of control, but I can't get in to see a psychiatrist for 7 months. So
Right.
there seems to be a big wait list for people to access it. And then, getting past the denial component and getting past that, I really don't need outside help. I've read this book and I know what to do. I just can't get them to listen so I can do it. So it's an interesting phenomena. It's kind of opaque, if you will, but I've always thought of mental health issues as opaque because, there's usually layers, and most people don't think there are layers. They just have one problem, like if my wife was in the room and and she was breathing and irritating me, I can't get her to stop breathing, and we both have to be in the room. So what's the best approach to get the conversation going? And if two people are willing to sit down and talk and take turns and listen, because I think listening is real important, especially in family dynamics. You raise a family, you got kids around, then they're gone, and then you become empty nesters. And then there's all the other stuff that goes along with how people cope with their feelings. So, it's the kind of work, and I deal with people all the time. They always, ask me, what kind of therapist are you? And I'm not a therapist. So I work more on the lived experience kind of piece. And I just had a family, and I had a woman who had the issue, according to the family. When she met me, she says, I'm not talking to a man. And I said, you don't have to talk to me. I'm not your therapist, but your family's really concerned, and they wanted to make sure you understood that they're concerned. What do you think? What would it look like for you? Because you shared that they're in your space all the time. And, 38, living at home, for heaven's sakes, and completely dependent on the family. So it's one of those things. It takes a little while. So I made a referral and got her started, hopefully with, the right kind of point of contact, and then we'll get the journey started for her. But that's what I try to do, is just really encourage people to get to the best and highest level of care they can, especially if things aren't where they want them to be. And so many people are so angry today. The boiling point is right there. There's no waiting period anymore. Do you think you shared earlier? We haven't even talked about politics or the leadership or what's going on, because I think they're instigating and pushing most of it, and the buttons are getting pushed, and people don't have the tools. So I'm really hopeful that people will seek help and ask for help. And 3 of the hardest words in English language is I need help.
That's
So
all right.
how would you encourage people to get the process started of getting help?
Well, first of all, one of the good things again is that if people can go on Psychology Today, and they can look for a therapist anywhere in California if they're on insurance panels and they want their insurance to pay for it. They don't have to see somebody in their hometown. For instance, it's sometimes really hard to see a specialist, like somebody who specializes in child therapy. I mean, in our town, we have like one person that really does this with a clinic, and she gets overwhelmed. So if you don't want to be on a big waiting list, no, you can start virtually. That's important. And you can read about the therapist on their website. Everybody's available. So Psychology Today is a great place to start. And you aren't going to be limited by location. So I think that's one of the most important things. Psychiatrists are difficult to get because they're medical doctors who specialized in psychiatric medicine. There are not enough psychiatrists. That is a problem. I do tell people, especially with children, you've got to find a good medicate, or if your child needs medication, you want to be really careful. I would say that with all my clients. I work with just a couple of psychiatrists in my area, and people may wait, but I make that's a big area of concern. We need more psychiatrists, more people who enter that field. I believe there'll be enough psychotherapists for people, because we cannot dispense medication. We refer for that, and sometimes the family doctor can do that, but there is a shortage there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think very similar to how Scott and I believe addiction should be called a disease, that the stigma wrapped around being a psychiatrist or a therapist has, just in my life cycle, the movies, TV, and stuff, have meant if you're going to a psychiatrist, it means something's wrong with you and you're crazy. It means crazy. It's almost like we got to retitle your positions just so people feel more comfortable. It's a strange thing to say, I'm going to a psychiatrist, even though it's nobody's business. But when you do say those words out loud, you almost feel like you are crazy because that's what you were taught.
That's a generational thing too, because I would say that one of the good news is kids. I mean, sometimes I have to help them get off medication. They've been on ADHD medicine and they've outgrown it. But I hear what you're saying, that like my generation, the baby boomers, more trouble with it. Gen X, maybe a little more trouble with it. But millennials and Gen Z, they are all over therapy and getting the right medication. So I hear you. The stigma, mental illness there's something wrong with your brain, and the brain is part of the body. And just the ability to know that you don't have to feel ashamed of that is huge. I mean, Fred, I hear you. It's been like that for years, but it's changing.
Yeah, Scott often says if you break your arm, you go to the ER. But for some reason, when your brain is broken, it's a stigma connected to going to get it repaired.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Scott, you want to ask your magic question?
Yes, my magic question. What have we not? Fred hates this. That's why he encourages me to do it, to get it out of the way, Deborah. So what is it we haven't asked you that we should?
You've been really good. Let me give that a little bit of thought. There's so many things we could talk about. One of the areas I'm finding myself involved with is people who are retired. And I don't think we talk about that stage of life enough. The boomers are retiring, and for some people, it's just as smooth as glass. But there is a loss of identity that can go with that. Most of us are going to live longer. To completely retire from any engagement and just golf and travel, a lot of people hit a crisis and actually go into depression and have anxiety attacks. Because since we were small, we had a role. We went to school, we belonged to families, we had our job, it gave us meaning. And suddenly we may have the finances to do whatever we want, but there's a lack of engagement. So I work with a certain percentage of my population is at a loss and really hasn't developed their personal interest too much and needs to re-engage. There is a tendency for kids to move away and to not have family close by, to have health issues that interfere with engagement. So there's grief and loss and a respect. I actually normalize the experience of going through the withdrawal from the life you had in reinventing yourself that you won't know for a while, and sitting with the anxiety and finding ways for people to be a home, to just know it's normal. Just to know you don't just get that, retirement thing and just feel great.
You're not lying, because I recently went through this, within the 5 years, that as a single father, raising the children, and then they go away, nobody ever told me what I'm supposed to do now. What am I supposed to do now? And it happens to all of us. It's inevitable. If you raise your kids right, you raise them so they can support themselves. But all of a sudden, I don't have to pick anybody up on Friday at the movie theater. I don't have to go to the school dance or to the school for a parent-teacher meeting. All these things that play a role that you actually spend more time wondering what you could fill that void with. And I could see where alcohol, addiction, bad habits, all could play a role.
Doom scrolling, watching the news all day long. In your pajamas. For some people that's good, but for other people it's going to create a lot of anxiety. It's a big problem. It's a big problem.
It did for me. So, okay. So that was good. Where could people find your podcast?
SoulPath Sessions is on all platforms. You can find
Okay.
it. Yeah. I started doing it about 4 years ago. I'm re-upping it. I took a year off. I actually had a little sabbatical for myself. I had to reset myself. I had to go from the way I was working, constantly filling time, to realizing I'm not going to retire as long as I can, to having to fold in the things I was talking about. What interests me outside of being productive
Right.
for other people.
I'll put a link to it in the show notes.
SoulPath Sessions. And we talk a lot. We go anywhere. Brenda's fascinating, and we just bring in our interests, and we spend an hour together and have a great time like you guys are having.
That's excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Right. Well, thank you for including me today.
No problem. Scott, you want to give your phone number, Scott?
I do. 619-993-2738. Call me, text me, Google me, Scott H. Silverman, or go to yourcrisiscoach.com and let me know if I can be a resource for you and your family.
Right. And if you click on the show notes below, you could buy Scott's new book and his other 2 books. You could click mine and buy my books, which would be appreciated. And we'll put all the notes so you can connect to Deborah down below. Any special way for people to connect with you, social media or anything?
Yeah. DeborahMeitz.com is my website, and you can access me through there. And I have things I've written and all kinds of testimonials and all kinds of cool stuff. So you can kind of get my vibe and see what I do.
Excellent.
So Deborah Meitz is the best way.
I'll put that in the show notes also. Okay, so that's going to be it, Scott. No show next week, Scott, because I am away on vacation.
Have a great time.
Yeah, I'm going to try. I get to see my kid. That's exciting.
Nothing better.
Except I got to fly with my other kid, and she's a nightmare on airplanes. Nightmare.
Deep breaths. Deep breaths.
I won't even sit with her. I got a different seat. She embarrassed.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing.
Poor baby.
It's embarrassing. I'm terrible father. Okay, so if nobody has told you they love you today, we love you. This is Your Crisis Coach with Scott H. Silverman and myself. And thank you, Deborah, for joining us. And we will see you guys again when I return in 2 weeks. Hang out there for a minute.
Thanks for having me on.